Na mô tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Na mô tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Na mô tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. I'd like to ask permission from the Mahatheras, from the Bhikkhu Sangha, from the gathered people and Sangha here to offer some reflections from this experience here and now, with a sense of gratitude to the Theras and Mahatheras that are gathered here and through the last 2,560 odd years, and to the Lord Buddha, and through all that have supported the sasana, and particularly the people gathered here, the 1,000 or so people gathered here, the months of preparation, the 200 volunteers, the leadership, and for the space and for the support of the this event. I'd like to offer some reflections. Ajahn Chah Dhamma didn't mention that he was one of the first people who translated and wrote down the talks of Luang Por in the book Bodhinyana. That was the first translation, I think, of books. So we're very grateful to him. I met him in 1979 when I went to Thailand. As many of you have heard, that my introduction to the idea of forest monks came after wondering what to do with my life from about the age of 16, and then going on a meditation retreat when I was about after university. 1975, I then heard that there were such things as forest monks. And in those days, people were traveling to the East to find their guru. And I'd come from the East, so I thought, well, I'm too lazy to go back to the East to look for my guru. I'd heard the phrase, when the pupil is ready, the guru will appear. So I thought I would just figure it out. And then I heard that there were forest monks in London, and I was training as an accountant, and so I went up to see the forest monks in London. And that was Luang Por and Luang Por Sumedho and the group of monks that were living in the Hampstead Vihara in 1977. And then I moved closer to the monastery, just next door, in one of the buildings, one of the rooms next door. And then in 1978, I joined the community, intending again, like many, to just stay for a few months and then get on with the rest of my life. And what encouraged me was the the fact that these people who were living in Hampstead at that time and the way that they related to Ajahn Chah, which I saw in 1977, was not according to the worldly ways. Their happiness was not dependent upon power, position, money, family. And yet they weren't separate from society. They provided a measure and an example. I didn't know how long I would be able to stay, but there it was. I stayed, and then when Ajahn Chah came back to England in 1979, I was already shaven-headed and in white. I hadn't learnt how to ask for a Dhamma talk, even though Luang Por Sumedho had asked me to. So when I hear all of you chanting it together, I am very impressed. So, I went to Thailand on a day after Luang Por Chah returned to Thailand in 1979, and then went up on the train, same train as him, when he returned to Wat Pah Pong in June 1979. And I had expected that I would be given the opportunity to be a bhikkhu almost straight away, because by that time I'd been training as an 8 preceptor for longer than almost anybody else at that time, because the tradition in Thailand was to be in 8 precepts and shaven-headed and in white for just a few months, and I'd already been doing that for over a year. But I had to wait, and I'd gone on a one-way ticket with £10 in my pocket and no support to get back. And in those days, flights were about a third of an annual wage. And my parents were not interested. So I was just stuck. And then I met some other trainees and people. I met a guy from a Samanera who'd come up from Wat Bawan. He had been around for a bit. He was from Australia. His name was Philip. And then there was another Samanera who'd been with me as an anagarika in the summer of 78 in Oxford, but then had left and gone straight to Thailand. And hadn't been an anagarika for very long, but then was a Samanera by the time I reached. So he'd already leapfrogged over me. And that was Sean. And then there was another anagarika in Wat Pah Pong at the time, who I'd first met when he had hair down to the bottom of his back, right down the back. And he was an anagarika. And that was Steve. So that was the 4 of us, 2 anagarikas and 2 samaneras. By October 79, Steve and I had been given the Samanera training, and we were still using those names, but we hadn't been given Pali names. And then by May the following year, we had prepared all our necessary things for the training as a bhikkhu. We'd prepared the dye, sewed the robes, made the toothwoods, learnt the chanting. And in those days, there were no phones and there was no electricity, and there was no appointments. So we didn't know when the ceremony for our Upasampada was going to be. So we'd walk over to Wat Pah Pong, or if we could get a lift, we'd get a lift. And if not, Ajahn Chah was there, we'd say, when is the ceremony going to be? And he wouldn't tell us. We'd go back again. And we'd come again. And not today, not today. And then one day he said, it was about 5 in the afternoon, he said, okay, this evening, go and prepare the place. And I still don't know whether he knew, but it happened to be my birthday. And that was June the 3rd, 1980. So as a birthday present, he gave me 3 companions, Ajahn Dhammo, Ajahn Jayasaro, and Ajahn Kemanando. And the 4 of us are still bhikkhus, I think. We're friends for that, and that was a very lovely birthday present. 45 and a half years ago. The sort of teaching of Ajahn Chah was, people on a day like that would like to hear about that. And the bit that's in the book, in the Stillness Flowing book, is the story about him. When I was with him, I was driving the van that took him up to Edinburgh, and we'd stopped off at a place where that photograph, which is not this one, which was drawn in Hampstead, but the other one that's with the pillars behind it. And I was very keen to help wash his bowl and that sort of thing. And he took one look at the way that I was doing that he stopped me, and through his attendant, Ajahn Prabhakara at that time, showed me and got down and carefully showed me how to take care of a bowl and dry it, which I trust you've all learnt about now. And at the end of that, he said, I'll teach you how to dry a bowl. Ajahn Sumedho will teach you how to go to Nibbana. And that's it's 3 teachings in one, really, because obviously he showed me how to look after the bowl, and the bowl is the symbol of the Buddha's head, and the transformation that happens when things are received in the light of knowing, in the light of clear understanding. The transformation, which is nourishment. And it's also a lesson for his confidence. He gave me confidence in Luang Por Sumedho. And it also, for Luang Por Sumedho, through his demonstration, he was able to show the importance of just teaching his disciples the ordinary things like taking care of a bowl. So economical with a few words and some actions, useful teachings. The other one, which was, I think standard, is the walking meditation. Of walking, it was just a vague instruction. He just said, walking meditation, just walk up and down on your walking path, and discard parts of your body at each end. So you end up, take off the hair of the head, imagine that, and then walk back, the hair of the body, nails, teeth, skin, all the organs, and just leave them at piles at the end of the path. And as a visualization exercise, it's it's a useful one and a helpful one. Of course, with that, when I teach it now, I also make a point of stressing the importance of metta meditation, the importance of not dwelling in aversion. And when I taught this once in America as part of a retreat that I taught, the people were receptive, because it's like you've got a chance with this. It's just you're giving up all this sense of what we really associate with. I mean, how much of your identity is around your hair, ladies and gentlemen, and and how much of it is about how your nails look, or and then that sense of walking gently with a sense of letting it go, and just one of my first meditation teachers taught me about walking meditation just as walking like a column of just energy, just moving from one place to another, just that sense of just the energy of this movement. So you can try it, but do practice the sense of not dwelling in aversion, the sense of open acceptance that doesn't push anything away and doesn't demand anything. Because when there's a sense of I want things to be different, I want myself to be different, or I want other people to be different. And even if it's with a sense of I want them to be better, notice that there's a criticism going on there. And get behind that sense of criticism to the compassion that comes from behind it, which is, I wish beings to suffer less. I wish myself to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. So any sense of self-criticism or criticism of others, if one can reach in one's heart the sense of, I wish that being to be free from suffering and the causes of suffering. I wish beings to be free from ignorance and the causes of ignorance. Then that's a more wholesome route to rest in, a more wholesome place to rest in. And in investigating this ignorance and the causes of ignorance and the nutriments of ignorance, I came across something in the Anguttara Nikaya in the Tens, and it's indicative, I feel, of how the Buddha's teaching works, because yes, it's about causes and conditions, and yet it's also about timeless Dhamma. And the cause or the food for ignorance in this is the 5 hindrances. And you've heard the 5 hindrances, the sense of, and then what's the food for the 5 hindrances? And it's and food gives for me the sense of something that that is grown and transforms. Because when you're all interested in food. Is your food delicious? Is your food beautiful? Does it taste nice? And looking at and investigating how food works and the transformations that happen with feeding something. The food for the 5 hindrances are the 3 unskillful actions by body, speech, and mind. And that's interesting in itself, because why do we act unskillfully? And what's the food for that? And then there's food for that in the lack of restraint of the senses. Senses are, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. These things that, when we just let them run riot and just follow them and try to seek pleasure out of them, then we get caught in unskillful actions of body, speech, and mind. And there's a food for that, lack of restraint of the senses, and that's in this list it says sati sampajanya, not knowing what one's doing and why one's doing it, not looking around things and actually saying, well, why? What's the result of this? And then giving a sense of purpose to what one does. Lack of sati sampajanya is a food for lack of restraint of the senses. And this is because we don't go to the real source of things. The yoniso manasikara, we're not really contemplating what we're doing, so we don't know what we're doing. I mean, for the monks, we have these yoniso manasikaras for the basics of life. What do we have clothing for? Only for the sake of to ward off cold, to ward off heat, to ward off the touch of flies, mosquitoes, wind, burning and creeping things, and for the sake of modesty. It's reflecting on, how do I relate to this so I relate to it wisely? Food, how do I relate to alms food? Not for fun, not for pleasure, not for fattening, not for beautification, but only for the maintenance and nourishment of this body, for keeping it healthy, for helping with this holy life. Thinking, I will allay hunger without overeating so that I may continue to live blamelessly and at ease. Really considering why you're using things. Shelter and medicine as well. And then, because the lack of yoniso manasikara is because we don't really, what feeds that is lack of hearing useful things, lack of hearing good Dhamma. We just, you just don't get the right information. Actually lack of faith. It's actually lack of faith. It's not lack of hearing good Dhamma. It's lack of confidence in the good Dhamma. It's actually lack of confidence in the good Dhamma. We just don't think that it makes any difference because we haven't heard good Dhamma. And because we haven't heard good Dhamma is because we haven't lived with or been around good people. Satpurisa. Good people are people that are really worth cultivating and having good relationships with. Because then we hear about good things. We hear about useful things. Then we can really have confidence and really consider, it is possible. Awakening is possible. It is possible to be free from greed, hatred, and delusion. It is possible to act in ways that are not coming from a sense of inadequacy. It's possible to be free from the sense of inadequacy, the sense of I can't cope. The sense of I can't cope is the one that means I need something to make me happy, or I need something to make it happy. Or I can't cope, I have to push it away. And that's greed and hatred. And that comes from a sense of believing in this sense of inadequacy, which is false. If we know that, then we can start to contemplate and think, how do I use this sense of separation in a way that is actually going to reduce suffering now and in the future? How can I really relate to things so that I can bless them and they can bless me rather than be a curse? And a blessing, and this is really what I received from Luang Por Chah and the teachers, is the encouragement to do something that I didn't think I'd be capable of doing. And that's a real blessing. When I'm encouraged to do something good and useful and wholesome, which I didn't think I could do, then I feel blessed. I feel cursed when in some way that is, I'm stopped from doing that in some way. And sometimes the blessings and the curses can be intentional or unintentional, which is why we have, things about forgiveness and stuff like that. But then we can really consider what we do, and then we can practice a sense of self-restraint, sense restraint, the sense of the self not going out through the senses to try and control the outside, but sense restraint is covering the wounds and actually attention more inwards rather than going out. And that attention inwards, 80% of one attention inwards, 20% out, is a good balance. It's really to know what world we're creating out there and be careful about that. Because then, with that, with sense restraint, then we can really start to begin to practice the good causes, the good actions of body, speech, and mind, wholesome things, sucharit, the sense of what I do, I'm careful about how I act by body, speech, and mind, what I think about, how I speak, and what I do. And that will bring us into satipatthana. We'll be safe in these areas. We'll be safe with how we look at how our body is and how it's working, the breath, the posture, the whole of it, the way that the movement of the senses, which is Vedana, which is either towards or away or neutral, and be more interested in the neutral. Because the neutral, when we know the neutral, it's peaceful. When we don't know the neutral, it tends to disturb us. So know the neutral, go to the silence and the space. And then we can really give our attention to the citta, and we can know what the citta is. We can know the heart of our sense of where our world comes from. And that's where our purification can be. And our contemplation can be around the Dhammas. And we will know the 5 hindrances and turn them into Dhamma and transform them into Dhamma and contemplate. The next step from the Satipatthana is, of course, the Bojjhanga. And these are the factors of enlightenment. And the 7 factors of enlightenment are so, this is what it looks like. With mindfulness, contemplation of the Dhamma, with the effort, because the Buddhist practice is a way of effort. It's not lazy, it's a way of effort. And there's a sense of joy in that effort. And this is something that I think that we sometimes overlook. In the sense of, in doing good, there is goodness, yes, but enjoy the doing of good. Really, the people who are here helping here, the volunteers and everything, appreciate and enjoy the fact that you're doing good. And in yourself, whenever you have the idea of doing something good, in that moment, I have the possibility of doing good. Appreciate that. That is the practice of mudita. Mudita is joy at goodness. Joy at goodness in others encourages us to feel we can do similar. But also have mudita for oneself. Have a sense of joy at the goodness that one has for one, that one can do something that's good. One has done something that's good. One can do something that is helpful to others. And in that moment of joy, appreciate the goodness. So in doing good, there is goodness. Yeah? So be happy that you can help. Be happy that you can help yourself. Be happy that you can help others. Yeah? And in that, there's a sense of peacefulness. And a sense of, okay, the hindrances drop away. And there can be a continuity in that joy. And a sensitivity in that joy because you're interested and engaged and alive. And Buddhism, the summary of Buddhism that Luang Sumedho gives is, of course, just one word. But again, you've heard this by a few times. And probably when a group of school kids asked me to sum up Buddhism in 3 words at Amaravati, and it was just before the meal, and I was just, I'll talk to you afterwards. So all the monks were gathered, and because there's many ways you can sum up Buddhism in 3 words: Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, Sila, Samadhi, Panya, Anicca, Dukkha, Anatta. and Ajahn Sumedho was just going. One word. Awake. Because, in English, that's an imperative, it's an order, it's an instruction. And it's also a statement. In Buddho, that's what Buddha means, awake. One word is enough. And, the 7 factors of enlightenment are food for awakening through wisdom. So, enjoy your food. enjoy your association with good people. Because if you don't, then it'll feed another way. And ignorance, people wonder what gets reborn. People always ask, what is it that gets reborn? If there's rebirth, what is it that gets reborn? No. If there's no self, what is it that gets reborn? Yeah? And, ignorance is the food for bhava tanha. It's the food for more becoming out of inadequacy. Bhava tanha. Becoming from a sense of inadequacy and compulsion. Tanha, it's called thirst. I call it also inadequacy and compulsion, compulsive, inadequate behavior. Tanha, compulsive, inadequate behavior. Believing in a sense of, I don't have enough. Tanha, it's not saying that one doesn't aspire to things, because kusala chanda, a wholesome aspiration, is very, very helpful. Wholesome aspiration comes from a sense of, I can do this. If I put the effort in, I can enjoy doing something that's good, I can relieve suffering for myself and others. Create causes and conditions so that there's less stress in the world for myself and others. And this is our aspiration as Buddhists. This is our encouragement. And this is our test of our spiritual practice. Is there less stress in our life for ourselves and others? If you want to know how far you've progressed on your path, don't worry about insights, don't worry about understandings in this sense. Look in your social relationships. Is there less stress in your social relationships? Do you feel safer in your social relationships with everybody that you meet? Yeah? It's not going to completely reduce it, but can you feel less stress when you're relating to people? And can you generate less stress for yourself and others? Then your practice is bearing proper fruit. And there's a beauty in that. So I offer that may it be a reflection, and if you just take away one word, awake, then that'll be something that Luang Por Sumedho would be pleased with you. And for enough for today. And if it's been confusing, I apologize. If it's of any help, take it away and use it. And if it's not, leave it behind. Ewan.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.